Hey gang, it's Squill, and after covering the big action-packed stakes miniseries, I think it's only fair we switch gears a bit to a quaint little episode such as Season 2's Video Makers. Video Makers is by no means a crazy episode, but there's a lot of little things about it that just make it so damn charming to me. Even from the opening scene, there's just something so wholesome about seeing a bunch of characters hanging out together. That's something we don't really get all too often in these early seasons. Seeing Finn hand out drinks to everyone, it's just very comforting. Between this and the filming stuff later on, this episode actually makes pretty good use of its side characters overall. I think words like charming and comforting describe this episode quite well. Because despite Jake's insistence on romantic comedy, this one isn't really a laugh-out-loud riot. It certainly has its jokes, with the funniest easily being Finn and Jake's reaction to the copyright warning in front of Heat Signature 3. If I weren't using stills, this is definitely a moment I could relate to. But really, this episode's main focus is on the character interactions. Love this whole sequence of Finn and Jake filming random stuff. They really nail the amateur filmmaking vibe. Really brings me back to just being a kid and filming random stuff that I find interesting. Again, not all that funny, but so charming. It is funny though, that for an episode as quaint as this one, we get our first mention of the Great Mushroom War. Love just how nonchalantly Jake brings it up. Adventure Time was always the kind of show to put its characters above the lore. The vignettes of Finn and Jake filming their scripted scenes are very fun too. I think Slime Princesses is probably my favorite of the bunch. Something about the comedic timing of her jumping in the water, the crocodiles all pouncing on her, and Finn and Jake's stunned reaction just really gets me. And of course, that shot of Slime Princess making out with the crocodile is very funny too. Mr. Cupcake flexing and Jake getting jealous is also pretty funny. And of course, this episode originates one of Adventure Time's most iconic lines. The Finn and Jake conflict in this one is pretty superficial, but I think it works for a story as mundane as this one. Essentially boiling down to Finn and Jake having a disagreement over the genre of film they're making. The story doesn't really take this conflict very seriously, but it does feel true to film production. These little creative differences can absolutely trouble the production of a film. I mean, hey, if you want a recent example, look at how Moana 2 was cobbled together from a direct-to-streaming miniseries into a full theatrical film. I have yet to see Moana 2, but I'm sure it's an absolute mess, and it was probably hell to work on too. It's pretty clever the way BMO's used in this episode. We're definitely still in that prototype BMO era, before the more childlike and imaginative BMO we've all come to know. But the way they involve BMO and Finn and Jake's conflict here is pretty slick, as BMO is with Finn and Jake throughout the entire episode, just in a more passive role. Essentially functioning as the boys' walking camera. And as such, BMO is clearly observant to everything that's happening between Finn and Jake in this episode. Which is even foreshadowed by this little moment of BMO sticking his head out as the boys are arguing. So BMO being the one to call Finn and Jake out here feels earned within the story. And obviously this is the highlight of the episode. BMO-san here is very sweet and wholesome, a nice wrap to the episode. This is very nitpicky, but it is kind of funny how this movie club is never brought up before or after this episode. And in fact, what did Finn and Jake end up doing for every movie club after this? What, did they go out to record a new film every week? And speaking of nitpicks, it is pretty funny how Finn and Jake are showing Heat Signature 3, and they invited Marceline, only for them to show her the first one just a few episodes later. Of course, that episode was aired out of order and was likely intended to come before Video Makers, but it's funny to think about. Video Makers is by no means a mind-blowing episode. It's a bare-bones plot with a shallow Finn and Jake conflict. But it's episodes like this that show off just how much fun Adventure Time's world and characters are. That a story as mundane as this one still manages to be entertaining. Please let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments. And with that, check please.